All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And as folks come on in, we can welcome them. So first, thank you so much for attending. My name is Badri Chanduru. I'm the Director of Research and Planning at the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. And I have my colleague Ben Davis back there, and he'll be fielding questions from our virtual meeting and kind of guiding people in as they come in. And I just, here are the ducks. So I just, I'm thankful for your time today, and we're really looking forward to having a robust discussion. So this is a part of our comprehensive sourcing of needs across the state. So we're going to start with a presentation of some data that our team has put together to try to better understand what's going on in the Mid-South region. However, that's just one part of it. We've also put out an affordable housing survey that just closed at the end of July. And so we're in the process of analyzing all that information as well. And then these meetings are also a big part of really understanding the need across the state and specific regions. So once we finish the presentation, really looking forward to kind of hearing from you all about whether or not, you feel like this accurately portrays the needs of the Mid-South region and what else you would add or what's missing from our understanding of what's going on. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. First, I'd like to thank a few folks, Anna McQuiston, thank you, Gina Roberts and Laura Harris at the Midsouth Development District, as well as Shelby Loveland with the Raleigh Public Library, all of who worked with us to organize this event. And we're thankful for the space and this time today. So a little bit about the consolidated plan. For those of you that might not be familiar, the state of Tennessee consolidated plan serves as the state's application for between $50 and $60 million in annual funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD. These funds are distributed in the form of 5 grants. The first is CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant, the Emergency Solutions Grant, ESG, HOME, which is the Home Investment Partnership, the Housing Trust Fund, HTF, also known as the National Housing Trust Fund at times, and then HOPWA, which is the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS. And the consolidated plan, while it is about these 5 programs and the needs analysis that our team conducts, it's also a good chance and an opportunity for the state to actually assess Tennessee's housing needs across the board. And so we take advantage of this time every 5 years to better understand the housing landscape across the state. So the way the ConPlan programs kind of work is HUD gives the state of Tennessee these grants, and then 3 divisions across the state administer these grants. The Department of Economic and Community Development, ECD, administers the CDBG fund, and the CDBG fund is primarily for projects the projects that are associated with CDBG must assist folks in areas with the majority, areas in which the majority of the households are low income, and that low income definition means 80% AMI or below per HUD. And then the middle 3 programs, HOME, HTF, and ESG, these are administered by our agency, the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. And each of these programs does a variety of things. The HOME program administers grants for both home ownership and rental development. And those are for folks who make below 80% AMI. The HTF grant is for people who are extremely low income. So these are primarily rental opportunities for families or households who make below 30% AMI. And then finally, ESG offers grants for homeless providers and supportive service providers who administer programs for those folks who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness across the state. And then finally, HOPWA is the Housing for Opportunities for folks with AIDS, and that program is administered by the Department of Health. And so these 3 agencies, ECD, THDA, and the Department of Health administer these 5 programs, but THDA is responsible for the statewide consolidated plan. Before we kind of get into the actual information and analysis that we put together for you, I just want to acknowledge that we are Ben and I and our team are not from Memphis. We're not from the Mid-South region. So our understanding of this information is extremely limited. And that's what we're seeking to understand from you and develop a more comprehensive picture that we can then turn around and kind of incorporate into our statewide housing plan, as well as the plan we present to the federal government. And so we want to operate with a spirit of humility, and we want you to know that we understand that these data are likely outdated because most of it is from 2022, if not earlier. It's also, subject to sampling error, so there might be some accuracy issues there. And then finally, we just know that data just isn't going to capture everything. In particular, it's not going to capture the strengths of an area and what's going well. So, what is unique to the Mid-South region that makes things work here? What are some of the bright spots that have been happening over the last few years? Those are the kinds of things that we're just never going to really be able to capture just through data. So today we are going to provide a brief presentation of kind of the housing needs. Then we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A about that presentation. And then we hope that you will join us for focus groups. And that's where we would like to solicit your thoughts and feedback to kind of round out our understanding of the housing needs in this region. When we think about the housing needs environment, we think about several things. We think about future populations and households, kind of where populations are projected to go. We think about current populations and households, as well as their household incomes. We think about the current housing supply and housing prices. We also think about what future housing supply is needed, as well as, who is most at risk of housing instability. And so these are, this is a lot, right? Like it's not a simple thing to say, we know exactly what's going on with the housing landscape, and things are always changing and iterating. And we also know that this isn't comprehensive of other things that might be happening in the housing landscape. For example, Blue Oval City and the economic development that's likely to hit parts of this region soon. These are the kinds of things that we'll never really be able to capture, but we attempt to try to understand as much as possible. The framework we're going to use today is centered on three questions. What is the region like now? What housing is needed? And what happens if that housing is not built? When we look at what is the region like today, we're thinking of three questions. Who lives here? What comprises the current housing supply? And how much does that housing cost? And so in the Mid-South region, which you all are obviously aware of right there, when we look at the entire population statistics across the state, the Mid-South region comprises the third most populous region across the state, right behind GNRC and the East Development District. The gray cluster behind each development district signifies where the urbanized areas are. And so the Mid-South region is obviously home to the Shelby urban cluster right there. Over the last 5 years, the Mid-South region is the only development district that's actually experienced a decline in its population across the state. Tennessee is a fast-growing state, and that's particularly happening in the greater Nashville region, as well as the East Development region, Nashville and Knoxville. But in the Mid-South region, we're actually experiencing a decline, which is a pretty stark difference compared to the rest of the state. When we zoom in on the counties in that region, that decline is happening in every county except Fayette County. In Fayette County, we saw an increase of about 7.4% over the last 5 years in population, whereas Shelby County saw a decline of about 1.2%, down to about 900,000 folks in Shelby County, with the most recent data we have available. Lauderdale and Tipton also experienced slight declines, but those populations are smaller, obviously. So Shelby County's decline is contributing to the overall Mid-South County or Mid-South region's decline in population. Now, I want to acknowledge that this trend might not hold, especially with the Blue Oval City development that's being built currently. And so we might see a significant change in how the Mid-South region grows. And so it's important to not let the past kind of dictate the future when we understand that there are other things that are at play. Breaking down the demographics of the Mid-South region, only about 14% of the population is above 65. Compared to the rest of the state, that's about 3 or 4% less. And so about 17.5% or so of the remainder of the entire state is actually above 65. So in the Mid-South region, we're seeing the elderly population make up a smaller portion, and the majority of the, my apologies. And the majority of the population is actually, in that mid-age and younger adult section right there. When we look at race and ethnicity, about half the region is Black, and about 6.3% is Hispanic. And so that includes Hispanic folks of all races. So these are mutually exclusive groups here. When we look at the income distribution, the median income in the Mid-South region falls in between 50 and 75,000. So when compared to the GNRC region, the Greater Nashville region, that's an entire income step below. The Nashville median income is around 75 and 100,000 in that band right there. And so we are seeing a suppression of the median income in this region that we're going to, kind of connect with housing in a second here. As far as the tenure of households, about 60%, about 57% of households are owners, or they own their homes outright, and about 42% are renters. So let's look at this rate across the state. As I said, in the Mid-South region, about 57% of folks are homeowners. Compared to the state, that is significantly lower. Tennessee is a homeownership state. We, in the Greater Nashville region, 65% of households are owners. In the East region, 70% of households are owners. So in the Mid-South region, however, we're a much smaller percentage compared to the rest of the state are owners. I'm not saying that's good or bad. That's just kind of the way things stand as far as the composition of households. When we look at renters and owners by age, this is probably not surprising, but renters tend to be younger than owners. And that's because you need more time to develop, the resources to actually move into housing. And so only about, only about 15% of renters are 65 plus, compared to 35% of owners are 65 plus. By race and ethnicity, we see a disproportionate number of renters are Black in the Mid-South region. As I mentioned earlier, about half the region is Black, but 66% of renters are Black in the region. Owners, about 37% are Black, so they're underrepresented among owners and overrepresented among renters. By income, nothing surprising here. The incomes of renters tend to trend lower than incomes of owners. That's understandable since it costs more to get into a house upfront, and there are other sources of incomes that owners often have outside of their income alone. And so the median income for renters is in that 25 to 50K band in the Mid-South region. And for owners, the median income is between 75 and 100K. So that's two entire income bands above renters in terms of the disparate nature of incomes. When we think about incomes as AMI, that disparity really becomes pronounced. So among renters, the median AMI is between 50 to 80%. So these folks right here. Among owners, the median AMI is actually 100% AMI. And so that means you're looking at owners who are making almost twice as much as renters on average. And so that is a significant disparity when we're thinking about, wealth building and equity. Now we're going to talk a bit about the current housing supply. So we spoke a little bit about the current population and incomes. So let's look at what's going on with the housing supply in our region. When we think about housing supply, we think about it on a continuum. Housing, it happens as a part of a life cycle. We don't need the same type of housing in 20 that we do at 60 or 70. And so we need to be thinking about the housing environment as one that supports people through their own life cycle, but also through circumstantial changes. And so, on this end, we're looking at, for folks who are below 30% AMI, the very low income people, we're not saying this is necessarily always the case, but they are more likely to experience homelessness either chronically or at different temporal times in their lifetime, or they might need supportive housing services. For folks that are under 80% AMI, but above that 30% threshold, they might be great candidates for affordable rental housing as a part of the consolidated plan programs, for example, or other federal programs. And then when we're thinking about home ownership, really you need to be at least at the 80% AMI band or higher. There are not available home ownership opportunities for folks below 80% AMI. And then market rate housing is really for folks above 80% or even 100% AMI, and same with market rate home ownership. And the way we think about the housing continuum are there are events or circumstances that can either push you down this continuum or push you up this continuum. And our goal is to try to think about developing an environment that supports people as they move through their life and experience different changing circumstances. In the Mid-South, the vast majority of housing units are single-family detached housing units. And so we're looking at almost 70% of units in this region are single-family units. The rest of the units right here are multifamily units or are attached single-family units or even mobile homes or RV vehicles. And so this state overall is a single-family state. That is the housing stock we have here. And there's a reason for why housing supply looks the way it does. This is a graph that represents the national trends in housing starts. And so all of us kind of experienced the 2008 recession. That's really when housing starts kind of jumped off of a cliff. And that was for multifamily starts, single family starts, and manufactured homes. And this red line right here demonstrates what happened after the 2008 recession. And we've never really caught back up. And so what we're looking at is a backlog of supply that just has not been built over the last 15 years. The age of housing is very important when we're thinking about preservation initiatives and rehab. So it might be great to build lots of new homes, but if we're not doing the work to keep up the quality of existing homes, especially aging homes, then all we're doing is threatening the supply of affordable housing across the state. And the average or the median age of housing in Shelby County of rental housing is almost 50 years. And so you're looking at folks living in pretty old housing when it comes to rental housing in Shelby County. In Fayette County, that median age is 41 years, Tipton 40, and Lauderdale. Owner housing is slightly younger, but not really for Shelby County. So the median age for owner housing in Shelby County is 44 years compared to 48 for renter. It is younger in it is newer rather in Tipton County and Fayette County. So 30 years and 25 years respectively, which suggests there might be some new building happening in those counties. Housing prices. We've seen a dramatic change in median rent and median home sales. So median rent. Over the last 5 years, Shelby County has experienced an increase of 23.4% in median rent, such that now the median rental unit is more than $1,100 in this county. In Tipton County, it's also above $1,000 and it's experienced an increase of 32%. In Fayette County, an increase of 32% in 5 years, but the median is only $871. And then in Lauderdale County, that median has gone up by about 10% to be about $700. Home sale prices in Shelby County over 5 years, the median home sale price has gone up 54%. Fayette County, same, 54%. So now the median home sale that occurs in Shelby County is 285,000. And that is as of 2022 data. And we're about to get 2023 data, which is probably going to see an even higher bump there. Fayette County, the median home price was $340,000 at sale, and then Tipton 259, Lauderdale 123. The entire Mid-South region has seen home sales increase by more than 50%. So what does this mean? What housing is actually needed? Now that we have kind of looked a little bit at what the region looks like, what the population looks like, and what housing looks like here. What housing is needed? How do we know we need it? And what are the challenges to actually building that housing? And then in our focus groups, we're going to talk a little bit about what is actually working to help us build that. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Sorry, yes. I'm sorry. So we're going to look a little bit about future housing supply and what that looks like. And the way our team kind of approached thinking about what future housing supply is needed is we took a look at cost burden. Cost burden, by definition, means that households who spend more than 30% or more of their income on housing are considered cost burdened. And so that's gross income, and that can be that can include rent, utilities, any kind of housing costs total. In the Mid-South region, almost 50% of households, 50% of renter households are considered cost burdened. That is the highest across the state. Higher than Nashville, higher than Knoxville. And you hear about unbelievable rents in Nashville and in Knoxville. But the Mid-South region is actually the most cost burdened. That change in cost burden, it's gone up by about 3% in 5 years. So it was already high 5 years ago, still high. That change across the state, however, significant. So in Nashville, it's gone up by about 18%. So that's because it wasn't as bad as it is now 5 years ago. Whereas in this region, it's remained high. By county, about 50% of Shelby County renters are cost burdened. About 40% of Fayette County renters are cost burdened. 35 in Tipton, 38 in Lauderdale. Over 5 years, though, this is an interesting trend. I don't know how much of this is where the accuracy of the data really, might be a question here. And that's because of the small samples that we have in these rural counties. Our data suggests that over 5 years, the rental cost burden has actually declined in Lauderdale, Tipton, and Fayette, and has increased slightly in Shelby County. Severe cost burden is when households spend 50% or more of their income on housing. And in Shelby County, of the half that are cost burdened, half of those folks are severely cost burdened. So you're looking at folks bringing in $3,000 a month that are spending more than $1,500 on rent. And when you think about what that means, that's not leaving much in their pockets for, childcare, for food, for transportation, etc. Severe cost burden, again, in the Mid-South region has only gone up a little bit. Unlike the rest of the state, Nashville, for example, has gone up by 17%. And that's because, again, already very high, it's gone up a little bit. If we look at it on a county by county level, we're seeing a similar trend here. Back to the issue of sampling error. We're not really sure if this is accurate, if this is exactly what's happening. But besides Shelby County, all the other counties in this region have experienced declines, severe cost burden. So we've talked a little bit about cost burden. What I'd like for us to think through next is, when we think about cost burden, we can think about it as a component of several issues. One of those issues is whether or not the right families are living in the right types of units, right? So is it an issue of overall supply? Like, do we not have enough units for the types of families that need them? For example, for folks who are very low income, do we not have enough rental units that are affordable to them? Or is it more of an issue of we do have those units. There might not be the families that we want living there that are actually living there. And so our senior economist has been working on this analysis for a while now, and we have some preliminary estimates that we're excited to share with you. This analysis is done at something called a PUMA region level. And so in the Mid-South region, it intersects with two specific PUMAs, the city of Memphis PUMA and the city of Jackson PUMA. So I'm going to show you some data for both of those PUMA regions. We cannot overlay it directly to the Mid-South region, which is why we're going to be looking at it with these two levels. I'm going to give us a minute to just kind of soak in this graph. This can be a lot for folks who are not familiar with this kind of information. So just take a minute and then I'm going to explain it. Let me know when you've given up or you understand it. Okay. So each bar here illustrates the number of units that are actually affordable to families at each AMI band. So on this left-hand side, right, we have a little bit under 20,000 units that are actually affordable to folks below 30% AMI in the Shelby County or in the Memphis MSA and some surrounding counties. Of those approximately 20,000 units, a little more than half are actually occupied by extremely low-income families. The rest of these units are occupied by low-income families, moderately low-income families, or even upper-income families. This middle bar, for example, shows us that there's about 80,000 units in this region that are affordable to the 50 to 80% AMI band. But of those units, only about 17,000 of them, so 17 of about 80,000 units, are actually occupied by families who make that income. The remainder of those units are either occupied by folks who make less than that, which means they're cost burden, they're paying way more than 30% of their income, or they're occupied by folks who make way more money and can actually afford a more expensive unit. And of course, we can't mandate or dictate where folks live, but this does give us insight into what might be going on, that it might be more than just an overall supply issue. It might also be a mismatch issue. And maybe we're not building the right types of units in the right places. Any questions about this graph before I move on? Because I know this is a bit different.
Are you about to show us the bar that tells us how many people are in each?
Not yet.
But you will.
We're not ready to release those estimates yet. Yeah.
That's gonna be exciting.
Yeah. We are working on that though. Yeah. Absolutely. They will be posted in the next few months. We're working on finalizing all of this analysis, but we're also eager to incorporate the input that we get from these focus groups into our analysis, and we'll release them. So let's look at the other PUMA region, the city of Jackson, MSA, and Haywood and Lauderdale counties. Smaller populations, more rural. So in this region, we have a little bit under 60,000 units, maybe 55,000 units that are actually affordable to folks who make below 30% AMI. I'm sorry, fewer than 5,800 units, not 58,000. And a little more than 2,000 of those units are actually occupied by this. Right. The remainder of those units are occupied by folks who make more. And so there's nothing wrong, right, with living in a unit that's cheaper than what you can afford, because you might be trying to save money, you might have other expenses, etc. And that trend still holds even for this PUMA region, right? So for the folks so there's about 12,000 units affordable to folks who make between 50 and 80% AMI, and only about 3,000 of those are actually occupied by folks in that income band. So now we're going to talk a little bit about homeowners. We've developed something called a homeowner opportunity index. And what this does is it shows us approximately what percentage of homes that are sold are actually affordable to the median homeowner. And so the question that we're answering here is the median home affordable to the median homeowner? And what percentage of those homes fall into that category? So in the Mid-South, this is actually some good news here. About 50% of homes sold are affordable to the median homeowner. So that kind of makes sense, right? That's a good thing. Compared to the Nashville region, only about 30% of the homes sold are affordable to the median homeowner. And so we're actually doing okay down here, theoretically, as per the data, but there's probably a lot more happening back there. We're probably seeing suppressed property values, right? We're seeing, like property rates or property values not actually go up like they should in the region, and that might be hurting homeowners' equity. That's the kind of information that we're not going to be able to gather from just an index like this. When we look at it at a county level, that homeowner opportunity index has gone down a lot. And so even though 50% of homes are affordable to the median home buyer in the region, over the last 5 years, they've become significantly less affordable. And so in Shelby County, that number has actually dropped by 20%. So 5 years ago, about 70% of the homes in Shelby County were affordable to the median homeowner or home buyer. And now that number is only about 50%. And that trend holds across Fayette, Tipton, and Lauderdale County. In Fayette County, it's a 40% dip. So that means 60% of homes in Fayette County were affordable to the median homeowner 5 years ago, and only about 27 today. So what happens if the housing is not built? What does that mean? What housing instability are households actually experiencing in this region, and who is experiencing it? So we're going to think a little bit about homelessness. And so the way we measure homelessness is through the continuum of care districts. And so again, these don't neatly overlap with development districts. So down here, you'll see that there's 2 COCs we're going to discuss. The first is Tennessee 501. That's the Memphis Shelby County COC. And the next is 507, the Jackson West Tennessee COC. In the Memphis Shelby County COC, we see an interesting trend in homelessness. This data measures the point in time count. So one thing to know about the point in time count is it is always an undercount. The way it's measured is by going and literally counting the number of unsheltered people on one given day each year. And so back in 2017, the total number of unsheltered folks counted in this region was around a little bit above 1,400. And in 2023, that number is about 1,300. And so this suggests that somehow homelessness has remained stable. There was a dip in between. The dashed lines here, those are the years of data collection that were affected due to the pandemic. And we're just not very sure of those numbers. And so we put a dash there. So among this population, Black people trend very closely to the total population, whereas children also are similar, but make up a smaller portion of the total population there. When we look at the demographics of folks who are experiencing homelessness, we see an overrepresentation of the mid-age adult and young adults in the Mid-South region. The total COC population, again, for seniors is 14%, and only 6.5% of the homeless population are seniors. This is kind of an interesting trend because we're seeing elderly homelessness go up across the state and across the nation. But in this region, we're seeing an underrepresentation. Again, this is just one type of homelessness count, and it's not perfect, and it doesn't capture everything going on. As far as race demographics are concerned, Black folks are overrepresented among the unsheltered homeless population, making up 73%. of the point in time count, which is significantly higher than the demographics of the overall COC. And Hispanic folks seem to be underrepresented at 1.6% compared to 7%. In the Jackson, West Tennessee COC, so that's the much bigger region in West Tennessee, primarily rural counties. The total number of homeless folks, it appears to be a decline. But again, I'm very cautious about this, right? The point in time counts are really difficult. If you miss a few 100 people, it looks like a much bigger deal than it is. And then demographically in the Jackson, West Tennessee COC, again, a significant overrepresentation of the mid-age adult and the young adult population. Children make up about 15%, so they're underrepresented among the homeless population compared to the overall COC. Again, with seniors, an underrepresentation compared to the overall COC. And then racially, only about 19% of the Jackson, West Tennessee COC is comprised of Black folks, but in our homeless counts, that's about 34%. So a significant overrepresentation there as well. Another way to kind of think about this information is around concentrated areas of poverty. And so here we're looking at census tracts that are considered concentrated areas of poverty. So any census tract in a red outline here, those are concentrated areas of poverty. Now, if you take I don't know how well you can see that, but what I can tell you is those concentrated areas of poverty are also the ones that are experiencing significant cost burden. They're the ones in which more than 22%, if not close to 100% of folks are cost burden. And so that means the areas that have the lowest incomes are also experiencing the highest levels of cost burden. They're spending upwards of 50, 60% of their gross income on just rent alone. And in the Mid-South Development District, only Shelby County has concentrated areas of poverty per HUD's designation. Lauderdale, Tipton, and Fayette do not actually have any concentrated areas of poverty census tracts. That doesn't mean there isn't poverty there. It just might be more disaggregated in those counties. In these census tracts that are considered concentrated areas of poverty and are also experiencing high levels of cost burden, all of them, except two, are also racially concentrated areas of poverty, in which 50% or more, or 50% or more of the heads of household are parts of minority racial groups. And so for those of you that work with HUD grants, those are often referred to as RCAPs or recaps. Okay, so that actually concludes kind of the analytics portion of our presentation today. I'd love to kind of open up the floor to just a Q&A. What questions do you have about the data that was presented? What felt right? What felt off? You know, what's missing? What are things that we should be thinking about that we haven't incorporated here? This is what I'd love to hear from.
I have a nerdy question for probably the people in the audience. Can you go back to the one before? What are the two tracts where they're not minority households, where they're concentrated poverty?
We had this in our drafts, but it got too crazy, so we took it on.
How do we know where those areas would be that they're not?
The one in North Shelby.
Oh,
And
maybe a south of Midsouth somewhere? It's not. I would send that to one, but.
maybe the one along the river to the
North.
west.
Like the Fraser, North Haven, and Milton.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yes,
that would be my guess.
Yeah, any questions, thoughts?